The Crown and the Cross. In the heart of medieval France, when cathedrals were rising like stone prayers to heaven and knights rode beneath fluttering banners of blue and gold, there was born a king whose story would echo through the centuries. His name was Louis IX, and his crown was more than a circle of gold. To him, it was a pledge, a solemn vow to serve not only his people, but the King of Heaven. This is not simply the tale of a monarch. It is the journey of a man who fought battles not just with steel, but with mercy. A warrior who carried both the sword of justice and the cross of Christ. A ruler who could stand before emperors without fear, yet kneel before the poor in humility. We will walk with him from the courtly halls of Paris to the burning sands of Egypt. We will witness victories, defeats, and miracles that stirred the faith of a kingdom. And we will see how, in life and in death, Louis became not only a king to his people, but a saint to the world. Chapter 1. A Crown for a Child. Louis was born in the year 1214, in a world still trembling from the echoes of the Crusades. His father, King Louis VIII, died when the boy was only 12. In that moment, a crown heavy with responsibility was placed upon a head still too young for the burdens it would carry. His mother, Queen Blanche of Castile, stepped forward as regent, a woman as fierce in faith as she was in will. She raised her son with the conviction that the throne was not a seat of privilege, but a pulpit from which justice must be proclaimed. From her, Louis learned that a king must rule first by serving. She would often tell him, "My son, I would rather see you dead at my feet than guilty of a mortal sin." Those words burned into his heart like an unbreakable seal. Louis grew into a tall and graceful young man, his movements measured, his voice calm. He was strong in arms, skilled in horsemanship, and well-versed in the art of war. Yet it was not these qualities that drew people to him. It was the way he listened. Commoners could find him seated among them, his royal robes gathered so they would not drag in the dirt, hearing their grievances as though they were his closest friends. His eyes, a clear and steady blue, seemed to say, "Your pain matters." Even as a boy, Louis saw no difference between himself and the poorest in his kingdom, except that he bore a heavier duty to protect them. Chapter 2. The Just King. When Louis reached manhood and began to rule in his own right, he earned the title Louis the Just. Unlike many kings, he had little taste for pomp and extravagance. His joy came from making fair judgments and ensuring that even the weakest in his realm could find justice. He reformed the legal system, putting an end to trial by combat, for he believed truth should be determined by evidence, not by the strength of an arm. In the gardens of Vincennes, under the shade of a great oak tree, he would sit without crown or throne and hear the petitions of his people. Those who came to him found not an untouchable ruler, but a man who listened before he spoke. Nobles respected him for his honor, merchants for his fairness, and peasants for his kindness. Yet even in the peace of Paris, Louis's heart was restless. For beyond the borders of France and the Holy Land, the sacred city of Jerusalem lay in the hands of others. Louis's faith was not one that sat quietly on a throne. It was a faith that compelled him to act. Chapter 3. The Crusader King. In the year 1244, when Louis was 30 years old, a terrible sickness struck him down. Fever raged in his body, his skin turned pale, and his strength faded until those around him feared he would not survive the week. Lying in his chamber, barely able to lift his head, he made a solemn vow to God. If his life were spared, he would take the cross and lead a crusade to reclaim the Holy Land. The recovery was nothing short of astonishing. Before the year was out, Louis began preparing for the greatest endeavor of his reign. Ships were built in the busy ports, banners embroidered with the golden fleur-de-lis were sewn by noble ladies, and knights swore their loyalty to their king's holy cause. The Seventh Crusade set sail with a fleet that stretched across the horizon. The king himself, clad in chainmail beneath a surcoat bearing the cross, stood at the prow of his ship, gazing toward the east. For Louis, this was not a war for conquest, but a pilgrimage under arms. In Egypt, the Crusaders took Damietta in a swift and brilliant strike. For a moment, it seemed the way to Jerusalem lay open. But the Nile's floods slowed the army, disease began to spread, and the enemy rallied. At the Battle of Mansoura, the Christian forces suffered a devastating blow. Louis himself was captured, his royal banner torn down, his sword taken from him. Yet even in captivity, he bore himself like a king. He refused to curse his captors, treated them with respect, and continued to pray openly. His courage impressed even the Muslim leaders who guarded him. After paying a heavy ransom, an enormous sum of silver, Louis was freed. But rather than return home in shame, he remained in the Holy Land for 4 more years, strengthening fortresses, aiding the local Christians, and keeping his vow to serve God in the land where Christ had walked. Chapter 4: The King's Miracles. Long before the Church declared him a saint, people whispered of wonders surrounding King Louis. On the battlefield, soldiers told of the king laying his hands on the wounded and tracing the sign of the cross over them, after which they found unexpected strength to rise again. In famine-stricken towns, he ordered grain from his own reserves to be given freely, feeding the starving without asking for payment or service in return. In Paris, his daily routine included a ritual that astonished foreign visitors. Every day he welcomed the poor into his own palace courtyard, washed their feet, and served them food from silver platters. He did not do this for ceremony. Often, he would kneel so low to wash a beggar's feet that his crown would slip forward on his head. For Louis, these small acts of humility were not beneath the dignity of a king. They were the very heart of kingship. There were also quieter miracles. Quarrels that had lasted years were resolved after a single meeting with the king, as if his calm presence melted away anger. Men condemned to death wept when Louis came to their cell, not from fear, but from the mercy he showed them. After his death, pilgrims flocked to his tomb at St. Denis. Many returned claiming cures of illness, deliverance from danger, or sudden peace of heart after praying to the king they had once served. To those who knew him in life, these miracles were simply the continuation of what he had always done, lifting burdens, healing wounds, and bringing light into darkness. Chapter 5: The Crown Laid Down. In 1270, nearly 3 decades after his first crusade, Louis once again took the cross, this time for what would be known as the Eighth Crusade. Age had touched his hair with silver, yet his spirit was unshaken. He gathered his forces and set sail for Tunis, believing that a victory there would strengthen the Christian cause in the Holy Land. But the voyage was plagued with ill fortune. The summer heat in North Africa was merciless, and disease soon crept through the camp like an invisible enemy. Men who had survived battles fell in days to the fever. Louis himself was struck down. Even as his strength faded, the king continued to encourage his men, urging them to keep faith and not lose heart. Those who visited his tent found him lying on a simple bed, speaking not of conquest, but the mercy of God. On August 25th, with the sounds of the camp fading into the distance, Louis asked to be laid upon a bed of ashes in the form of a cross, a sign of repentance and surrender. His final words were a prayer. "Into your hands I commend my spirit." And with that, the warrior king, the just ruler, the humble servant, passed from this life to the eternal kingdom he had sought all his days. His body was borne back to France with honor, and the people mourned not only the passing of a king, but the loss of a shepherd who had walked among his flock. Yet in truth, they had not lost him, for his example would live on, and his name would be spoken with reverence wherever justice and faith were cherished. Closing, the legacy of a saint. 50 years later, the Church canonized Louis as Saint Louis, the only French king ever to bear that title. His legacy lives not only in statues and churches, but in the example he left, that power is a gift to be used for others, and that the greatest crown is not made of gold, but of virtue. To this day, Saint Louis IX is remembered as the model Christian king, a man who showed that true greatness lies in faith, justice, and the courage to live for something greater than oneself. Thank you for following our channel. Your support inspires us to keep bringing history and faith to life.